Chad, Clay Travis joins us coming up in about 40 minutes.
Our fearless leader.
We will be asking him about our story today with Stephen A. Stephen A. Smith, he knows the brand. And by and large, I like his content. I think he's always prepared. He knows exactly what he's doing here as he joined Bussing with the Boys.
But obviously the competitive drive, the why, you have literally everything. And in sports, when you're on a team, your goal is to win the Super Bowl or the NBA championship, all these different things. So you're competing against other teams, but also internally on the team you're at, you're competing with the guys around you. And so ESPN comes in, you talked about 2 billion views. You talked about being the man, number one for 12 years. And you see ESPN making a pivot to McAfee. Obviously great for the network. Sure. How do you, in your mindset, view a guy like McAfee who is extremely good at his job, in a lot of ways is changing the course of mainstream media and all those things from a competitive standpoint and also as a partner?
I am an aberration in this regard. I love Pat McAfee.
He's a man.
Love him to death. Love him to death. I love his swag. I love the fact that he's an honest brother. He don't give He'll let you know exactly where he stands. That's my kind of dude. That works for me. Now, is he as polished politically as me? Nope. Because he has no desire to be, number one. And number two, if we're being honest, he's white and I'm black. He didn't have to be. I had to be. So I get all of that. And I'm not knocking him for it. I get it. Pat McAfee is a sensational talent. And it would be stupid for me not to root for him because he's one of the pioneers in this business, just like Bill Simmons is, just like Joe Rogan is, and others. What they have done for themselves in the digital stratosphere speaks for itself. I'm new to this. I'm a baby.
And he's talking about the streaming aspect and the YouTube, and he's launched his own Stephen A. Smith show. He's certainly getting into that. 600,000 subscribers there. And a lot of his content is going there. We play a lot of content from the Stephen A. Smith show, more so than First Take on ESPN. And there's no coincidence that what Pat McAfee did and what he called out management, top execs, Norby Williamson at ESPN, there's no question that Stephen A. can do the exact same thing. And everyone knows now you're not going to be punished at the very top of the media hierarchy at ESPN. Chad, the line of I'm black, he's white. Well, now from that angle, he's looking at the contract extension. He wants to be the highest paid at ESPN. He's made no secret about that, even when he joined Clay Travis on Clay's show. And this is his brand. He's getting more discussion by bringing up Pat McAfee, which by and large he was complimenting him.
Oh, yeah.
And he knows that going down the McAfee lane is going to pit him versus ESPN as well. And that's exactly what he's doing because, again, his contract's coming up. He wants to do less. He wants to be paid more. And not just more, he wants to be the highest paid. And the new version of Stephen A. is Pat McAfee. It discusses being polished. By and large, he is. But as he was making the name of Stephen A. Smith, after being the columnist and working in print and working his way up and doing great things, doing exactly that, he was also known for being loud and obnoxious on First Take. Was he not?
Oh, of course.
And that's exactly what McAfee show's all about. Of course.
Now, maybe I have a little bit of different perspective on this. First off, you're going to get clipped by shows like ours and others anytime you play the race card. Okay?
Yes.
So, and Stephen A. Smith is a smart guy and understands this and knows it. So I think he knows. I think he's probably thanking us and OutKick and his buddy Clay Travis, who they've appeared on each other's podcast talking about these things, because he brought up the fact that McAfee's white, I'm black, I've got to be more political, or maybe he doesn't have to be as political as I do in order to get the job done. Here's the difference with this, and I took this a different way as to what Stephen A. Smith is saying. I'd love to get Stephen A. Smith on the show, and I can ask him what he meant by it, because he was very complimentary of McAfee. And this is where I buy what Stephen A. Smith is saying. Not because black and white, but because of where they were when each of them started. Stephen A. Smith comes from a writing background originally. He had to prove himself and leap off the screen as a television personality. If Stephen A. Smith in his first year at ESPN went on air and lit a torch to everyone at the company that's at the executive level and started calling out ESPN executives by name, I don't think it would have gone over well. Now, if Stephen A. Smith today decided to do that because of his power, he could probably get away with it. Had he done it 4 or 5 years into his ESPN tenure, and he claimed that it's going to be racist if they do anything to me, he probably would have gotten away with it, because we've seen that card played a number of times too. I didn't take this, though, as, oh, well, he's white, so he got where he is because he's white, and I'm black, and I got to work harder and do these things. I took it, Hutton, as Pat McAfee came into a situation where he was already a superstar digitally. He had already made his following. He had done it on his own. He didn't necessarily need ESPN when he came to ESPN. Stephen A. Smith needed ESPN to make him a star, and they did. And he did it for himself also. I'm not denying his talent and what he did for ESPN. He's done a lot. But point being, McAfee kind of comes in with this, I don't give a bleep. I don't care. I've already made a ton of money. I can go sign a deal with someone else and make a lot of money. We've got a lot of people watching online already. I don't really need ESPN. So I'm an honest guy, and if I feel like Norby Williamson is effing with our show because he didn't like us and didn't want to hire us, I'm going to call him out by name. Because who cares? What's the worst that can happen? They're going to try to fire me? They're going to kick me off of game day? I'm the most fascinating thing on game day right now for ESPN. I think he just has a I don't give a bleep attitude when he came in, and that's different from Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith notes that he's talented, notes that he really likes him, likes his honesty. But yeah, Stephen A. Smith, when he got to ESPN, had to play a different political game. He had to get in good with his bosses. He had to get the bosses on his side. He had to play politics a lot more than McAfee. I don't think that's a black-white thing as much as a station-in-career thing, as both of them arrived at ESPN at different points in their career.
Well, it used to be a right-left thing. Just ask Sage Steele.
That's true.
Versus Jalen Rose.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's absolutely accurate.
Especially with John Skipper when he was in charge.
Sure.
There were big issues there.
And look at the behind-the-scenes payments being made. Coming to some agreement in the court system. Chad, you mentioned they needed ESPN. Stephen A. coming. Now ESPN needs both of them. And the action or the lack thereof in response to that whole saga with McAfee and Williamson and execs and the college football playoff and all that, the fact that they did nothing but just say that we're going to keep everything in-house tells you how much they need Pat McAfee. It also will tell you how much they need Stephen A. when they acquiesce to what he's going to ask for. I don't think there's any question he's going to end up being the highest paid.
Yeah, they're two of the most powerful talents. Stephen A., I'd argue first, McAfee probably behind him, but two of the most powerful talents currently at ESPN. And I'd also argue that I don't know if ratings truly matter for Pat McAfee, because ratings have not been good of his show on linear TV.
Yes.
And Stephen A. Smith can tout the fact that I'm giving you a huge audience when I sign off on First Take. And you take that audience and it diminishes big time. Diminishes more than the Sports Center that aired after before you took over as Bill Simmons. Now that they're feuding, Bill Simmons and Pat McAfee. Bill Simmons, the sports guy, pointed out that the Sports Center was doing better with television ratings. But, Hutton, I don't think ultimately that Pat McAfee is being judged by TV ratings other than College Game Day when he appears on that. This was a move to bolster ESPN digitally and what they do with that part of their company, because Pat McAfee brought such a digital presence already when he came over to ESPN.
So Stephen A. now on YouTube, 567,000 subscribers. And here is the Stephen A. Smith Show description. Again, not on ESPN. Stephen A. Smith Show, Smith gives you his renowned point of view, breaking barriers beyond the world of sports and tackling issues across entertainment, pop culture, society, business, and politics. 3 times a week, you'll hear his live, unfiltered opinions on the day's biggest headlines, as well as straight-shooting interviews with top celebrities, game changers, and thought leaders across society. That's the next level for him, and you better believe ESPN wants to tap into that because they're doing that with Pat McAfee.
Well, and that's that you could take that description and put it underneath Pat McAfee and just replace Stephen A. Smith with Pat McAfee. And that's kind of what Pat McAfee's show is doing, with a little bit more of a mix of camaraderie, because it's kind of just a group of dudes talking about
But that
everything.
goes back to what Stephen A. just said about the difference between the two, right? But here he's riffing on whatever he wants to discuss. And on First Take, it's kind of the same vibe where he's got someone across the table from him, and it's more of a point-counterpoint, right?
Yeah.
And this is where he's – think about how often we've discussed him and played clips from Stephen A. And is it from First Take or is it from this YouTube show?
It's from YouTube.
And that's on purpose.
Yeah.
He's saying a lot more there.
I also think that the goals of each guy are a little bit different. And I say that knowing that Pat McAfee is a natural showman. Like, he wants to be the show. He wants to be the center of attention. And he's a great entertainer when it comes to that. But I do believe that Pat McAfee wants the show to be the star. When he's doing the Pat McAfee show, he does want to highlight his supporting cast. He wants guests on. He wants the guests to be very good. He's a very good distributor. They play well off of each other. Him and his crew of guys, mixed with the guests they bring in, mixed with celebrity guests. Stephen A. Smith very much wants to be the star. He is the star. He wants to be the star. He wants that to be about him. I would compare him to Clay Travis in that way, right? That description you just read about YouTube, I mean, Clay could probably say Stephen A. Smith is ripping him off, because there are some words there that when Clay founded OutKick would have been the same description of OutKick, right? In what they're trying to accomplish. But they're two superstar media members that are very good about just being themselves on camera and on mic, and they want it to be about them. I don't think Clay's is interested in interviewing other guests or interviewing people as much as he is getting his opinion out there. I think Stephen A. Smith is the same way. I think McAfee's a mix of all that. He wants his buddies to be involved. He wants the show to be the star. He wants to interview people. The dude's also a professional wrestling background guy. Like, he knows how to be the show and be the center of attention.
Yeah, but think about Stephen A. from this angle. Kenny Smith. We've been discussing him from the weekend with Reggie Miller. It was Stephen A. and Kenny Smith.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that didn't happen on TNT.
Right. No, he did a good job with that. And
I think I'm saying, like, he knows his brand, and it's not just First Take. And the timing of this is also not coincidental.
Well, the point is, he understands that when he's on ESPN, it is Sports Take Stephen A. Smith, but there's an opportunity to expand to other markets. And that's not different from Clay. That's not different from a lot of people. Pat McAfee does some pop culture stuff, but it's mainly about sports on his show all the time. I think Stephen A. Smith sees an opportunity here for his personality to cross over into other genres.
And what's that value to ESPN? You know what I mean?
I would say it's large, but I think in an evolving ecosphere of sports,
it's the McAfee
we're going to
model.
get into this about competition. Yeah. Also, and how competition raises a lot of different stakes and makes everything better. I mean, I think when Pat McAfee goes out and says Norby Williamson is a rat on his show, that is also Pat McAfee saying, fire me, fools, if you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
You told me I could be myself. This is me. I'm being me. And if you're going to F with me, I'm going to call it out on my show, and it's going to be a story. And if you don't like it, I'll go cut another deal with FanDuel. And I'll make millions doing that, right? I mean, that's kind of his mentality. I think Stephen A. Smith.
And he owns his YouTube platform.
I mean, look, ESPN helps Stephen A. Smith a lot in his platform, but there may come a day where Stephen A. Smith isn't going to get what he wants from ESPN, and he decides, I'll make a go of it elsewhere. I'll do something different if the brand isn't right for him.
Chad, I think do something elsewhere if the money's not right for us is exactly what the Big Ten and the SEC are saying today. Meeting in Dallas, a college football playoff. That anyone that has anything to say or do with the college football playoff has been meeting. Yesterday we had the announcement that was inevitable, the 5-7 model, which is what Greg Sankey has wanted but received backlash for, even after we saw the Pac-12 begin to dissolve, right? I'm curious how everyone went the opposite angle. You had to have a unanimous vote. They got that. And the 5-7 model will have the top 4 conference champions, the conference champions plus you'll have the non-power 5, the group of 5, highest ranked team that will be automatic qualifiers. And then you have 7 at-large teams get into the college football playoff. This benefits in a great deal the Big Ten and the SEC, who in some years could get 3 to 4 teams in the final field of 12. And when you just think about the increased profile, where we have the expansion now for the Big Ten and the SEC with the new teams coming in officially this upcoming season, and the partnership that they have formed to discuss NIL, transfer portal, and more, I don't know how much partnership will be involved whenever it's down to that final spot for the playoff committee, but there are definitely the haves and the have-nots. And what they're discussing today is the revenue distribution. Because typically, and in the past, the Power 5, they've received about 80% of the money from the college football playoff, and the Group of 5, they receive about 20. But there's new money coming in with the report that ESPN's about to pay $1.3 billion annually to extend their contract to the next 6 years of this format. But the 5-7 format is only going through the next 2. Do we see the expansion to 16? That will be the next level. And what they're going to do is flex and say, hey, you guys don't want to expand to 16? We'll go do our own thing. Because everybody's got to have the Big Ten and the SEC. This helps the ACC because they're guaranteed to get a team in now. They're not going to be left out. And it certainly would help the Group of 5 because they're a part of the revenue distribution of this. But Florida State and Clemson, they want more of the pie in the ACC. The Big Ten and the SEC are going to ask for more of the pie of this revenue distribution now that they're going to have more say, and they've had more say, more teams involved in everything to do with the 12 right now. And consider what's going to happen on the back end of this, where if you look at last year, just the final college football playoff rankings, here's what it looked like, Chad, if it was a 12 team and not the 4 team. Where you have the teams at the top, Michigan, Washington, Texas, and Alabama. But Liberty is the automatic from the Group of 5. They would be the 12 seed. They're the highest ranked Group of 5 team in the college football playoff rankings. And you have your matchups. Georgia would be hosting Ole Miss. Penn State on the road against Ohio State. Liberty takes on Florida State, who gets in. And Missouri hits the road to Oregon. I've got questions about this, though, because beyond the money, what's left here? You have a partnership between the Big Ten and the SEC. I don't think it applies here. There will be a great rivalry that will continue. The rankings really won't be the rankings either to me, because if you look at the top 25 from last year, it's also about matchups in round 1. So are you going to see a rematch on a college campus after maybe we've just seen it? Or does the committee actually change the rankings a bit to fit the format that ESPN is going to want? For instance, Oregon was facing Missouri, but Georgia was taking on Ole Miss. This year, that would be a rematch. Ole Miss will host Georgia this year in Oxford. Does the committee then maybe flip-flop things to where you send Ole Miss on the road to, say, Oregon? And then you end up having a potential matchup of, instead of Liberty and Florida State, maybe it's Liberty against Georgia. Again, just thinking out loud how they're going to mess with the rankings. Rivalry weekends are going to be impacted, yes, but I think it could also impact the maybe the first impression, maybe the last impression in some cases that the committee may have. More SEC and Big Ten on the back end, and the job statuses. What this means for James Franklin. What does this mean for Lane Kiffin? For Josh Heupel? For Dabo Swinney? Scott Satterfield? Brent Venables? Brian Kelly? These dudes are going to be judged now on getting in, and it really comes down to Satterfield, for instance, is now going head-to-head at Cincinnati against a team like LSU or an Oklahoma team that maybe has dropped 2 or 3 games in the regular season. The last teams considered last year: Ole Miss, Oklahoma, LSU, Arizona, Louisville, Notre Dame, Iowa, and NC State. Notre Dame is guaranteed to have to play in round 1 no matter what, based on this format. They said they would do it gladly. Put Marcus Freeman at the top of the list along with James Franklin that need to make this new format, especially with the 5-7 model and not the 6-6, because now you have a greater chance of getting in at the at-large, and you otherwise didn't. And we're going to see coaches fired, and the top 2 conferences become even wealthier based on the new format because they got what they wanted, and they always will now. Because they're going to flex and say, we'll break off and do our own thing if you guys don't want to join us.
I can't help but look at this, and I look at Liberty as a part of this, and I think this is just a temporary thing because Liberty ain't going to be a part of whatever's coming to college football. They're just not. None of the group of 5 will, if the inevitable ends up taking shape. So I still feel like this is a good thing right now, and it's a bridge to whatever's coming from a Big Ten, SEC, Super PAC, Alliance, whatever we want to call it. Now, in terms of for job security, James Franklin at Penn State, a good example. I just think the target now will shift. So James Franklin, based on what he's accomplished, will pretty routinely make a field of 12 in a playoff, and he will also routinely lose in his first game of the playoff every year. So now suddenly it will be James Franklin can't win a playoff game. Now I'll look at Josh Heupel at Tennessee. Suddenly, Josh Heupel at Tennessee, the expectation is you get to that playoff, right? It's not right now. It's not the expectation is not win the SEC when you have Georgia there and you had Alabama there and others, right?
Yes.
But it's compete for the SEC. But if not, you better damn well be in that 12-team playoff. And if you're not, then you end up getting fired because you're finishing 16-20 every year, right? Now that's not enough. So I think for some it will help with job security. You mentioned Marcus Freeman, a good example at Notre Dame. I think getting in would probably be enough. I think with Penn State, if it just continued to be the same old thing, but now the season ends with a loss in the playoff as opposed to a loss in a non New Year's Six bowl game,
put the matchups
then
back up.
They're still going to be unhappy at Penn State, and eventually they'll move on from James Franklin.
Yeah, because look who Penn State's matched up with in the hypothetical last year, round 1. They're against Ohio State.
Yeah, they're getting their ass kicked in Columbus.
But
that's likely what's going to happen.
And Ohio State's coming off a loss to Michigan.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for Ryan Day?
Right.
All of this is fascinating, but I also wonder, do they want to have a rematch in round 1 on campus? Or do they want different matchups?
Yeah, NCAA tournament model.
Yes.
NCAA tournament has rules to avoid getting a conference foe that you've already played in round 2, much less it's never going to happen in round 1. Yep. So they can toggle the system, and likely, they're never going to admit to this, but they can toggle the seed line if they want to manipulate it to get the matchups that they ultimately want, right? That's I think you're onto something there. The committee's going to find a way to get the most compelling matchups for television while also avoiding repeats of other games. It's not always going to happen. You're going to have repeats regardless. Even when they try to avoid some, you might get another one. But, yeah, they're going to do whatever they can to try to make it the most compelling television product as possible.
And I also, if the ACC, for instance, based on the way Florida State finished unbeaten, right, in the regular season, do they actually get the bye now? And do they actually end up as the highest-ranked conference champ?
I think so, because they'd rather see Alabama in an extra game.
Because they're guaranteed, because the Pac-12 is no longer existing.
Yeah.
And you've got the Washington who got the bye, but you also have Bama and Texas who were ranked ahead of Florida State. I'm intrigued by the committee just because if you move the seeds around, Chad, you also affect the teams that get the bye and who is matched up with the next round. So you can actually have a better team facing the 1 or 2 seed.
I like this format.
I love
this. This is the one that makes the most sense.
And
I think
coming.
Greg Sankey, when it comes to big picture stuff like this, and I do think he's leading the charge.
Yes.
Along with Tony Petitti, but I think if I'm looking at Alpha A, Alpha B, Greg Sankey of the SEC is Alpha A in this scenario. He's very good at making common sense decisions that most sane people can look up at and say, boy, that makes a lot of sense for college football. This playoff format, the seedings we saw, everything with it, makes a lot of sense for college football. My biggest question mark is, does this make sense for college football 10 years from now when it's clearly haves and have-nots? And I'm not talking about haves having a chance to compete for championships and have-nots not having a chance. I'm talking about the haves competing at all versus the have-nots playing in a different classification and doing something different. it's all headed to me towards more of an NFL model. And this is a very NFL playoff situation, albeit with more buys, with percentage of the teams playing, but that's where it's all headed.
And final point, ESPN is going to have a big say in the 16 conclusion. We're going to have 16 teams. Why? Because a part of this reported deal for the extension and the $1.6 billion annually for the college football playoff, they can now sell off games to other media companies. You know, you can have Amazon come in and buy a game. You can have anyone, Netflix, whoever you want. They're going to want more inventory because of that. And there's no question that Sankey Petiti wants 16. So we're headed towards 16. And the question is everyone going to follow and take less of the percentage, or maybe the same, but Big Ten and SEC get more? Or are you going to actually call the bluff and say, go ahead and split off? They won't do that. They will not do that. Because everyone needs the life support. They need the parachute that this will provide. And so does ESPN.
I think
they need more inventory to sell it off.
When Big Ten and SEC, when they all start to collectively bargain with the other, I put in air quotes, Power 5, Power 4, I guess now, conferences.
Right.
When they start to negotiate with them and those two conference commissioners demand more of a bigger piece of the pie and more money, it's going to cause dissension. And it's going to lead to Tony Petiti and Greg Sankey just saying, okay, then we're starting our own thing.
Yeah.
We'll get back with you on whether or not we're going to invite you to play in our league or not.
That's on the docket today in Dallas.
Yeah, we'll get back to you individual schools, not conferences, and we'll cherry pick the ones that we want to come play ball with us in the NFL of college football.
Chad, we're talking money, big money for football. American commerce. Not conference, but commerce is on your mind.
We go one trip to Vegas for the Super Bowl, and Hunt and I are suddenly, we have VIP.
We win so much.
VIP bottle service one time in Vegas, and suddenly we're experts on big money. We know everything about it. By the way, Beyonce and Jay-Z just bought a mansion in Malibu. You know what the price tag on that puppy was? $200 million they spent. $200 million. 20% of a bill they spent on their mansion in Malibu. Anyways, I don't know where I don't know where I was going with that.
Who joins us in 10.
Let me try to segue this. So Jay-Z once had a competition in the rap game. That competition elevated Jay-Z to be a better rapper and a better businessman. I don't know what Beyonce's competition was other than the other girls in Destiny's Child and maybe her dad, who was also the manager. But that competition made Beyonce Queen Bee, made her better, right? She got better because of that. Competition brings out the best in us. America and American commerce is built on competition. It is not built on monopolies. It is not built on antitrust. It is not built on all the titans of industry coming together and deciding, here is how we're going to manipulate the public and make a bunch of money together. It is Coke versus Pepsi. It is McDonald's versus Burger King. It is AFL versus NFL that led to a merger and made America's game that much better. It's ABC versus CBS. Oh, but wait, is it? Is it ABC versus CBS? Because last I checked, Paramount owns CBS and Disney owns ABC. And now we've got this conglomerate of Disney, Fox, and Warner Brothers getting together. I say this as a Fox employee, okay? These types of situations and these agreements, while as a consumer of media, I initially see this new sports package of Disney, Fox, Warner Brothers teaming up. And I think to myself as a consumer, this is awesome because this is going to streamline things and make it easier on me, the consumer. I can now pay for one service instead of 4 or 5 and get most every sporting event I want to watch right there on that direct-to-consumer platform. That can be good for the consumer. I also say, as an astute historian, especially of American history, that buyer beware, because there are implications here for employees of all of these companies and eventually for the consumer that could be damning, that we don't know about yet. We're going to talk to Clay Travis about just this, because initially I think This is going to make it easier on the consumer. But when I really think about it, I also think, what does this mean for employees of these companies and the future of actual competition in media, and will that even exist if all of the titans of media decide to band together and form a monopoly? Fubo TV has decided this is not right and it's not legal, and they filed a lawsuit claiming Sherman antitrust violations with this pact. We'll see where this goes. We're going to have some of the most high-priced attorneys in the world fighting this on behalf of Disney, Fox, Warner Brothers. So we'll see where all this goes next. But Hutton, I can't tell the future. I'm not going to claim that I can. I just want to say that while at first glance I think this is a good thing for the consumer, and I want to see how all this plays out, I also will just lend a cautionary tale about what this could eventually mean when you start having companies this large teaming together and what that means for competition and commerce in America.
So what you're asking for is the Teddy Roosevelt 1901, trying to get rid of the
trust busters
with Roosevelt, with Carnegie.
He was breaking up all the trusts, right? There's the trust busting that was going on.
And Rockefeller.
Yeah. Teddy Roosevelt is maybe my favorite president, so this would make sense that I'm leery about this. Way.
Do these partnerships, is it necessary in order to actually compete with Netflix if you want to get in the space? ESPN wants to get in the space of direct-to-consumer. They're partnering with the NFL. The NFL wanted to partner with ESPN because they didn't have the NFL media platform necessary to push that distribution that they wanted to do. They needed someone else to help them. They've admitted that. Is all of this due to Netflix now flirting with the idea of live sports?
Well, I don't think it's about Netflix as much as, honestly, like Netflix is its own cylinder.
Netflix and
of
Amazon.
All this. It's Amazon and Apple.
Apple.
Amazon and Apple can do whatever they want because they have more money than all of those others combined, even Netflix.
But if you had the three big ones get in, what happens to everyone else?
I mean, that's on them to decide. Now, and there's going to be antitrust here also with these, and don't get me started on big tech. We could spend 4 hours on Apple and Amazon and the dangers of our world with those two behemoths just pulling the strings on all of us and everything and every election and all things going on at all times.
Right.
I'm very concerned about that, but that's a separate show. But Apple and Amazon, when they decide they want to go all in on sports, which they have not yet, but if they decide that, yeah, it's going to be a problem for everyone else. Netflix hasn't done much with live sports at all. You know, they've got sports documentary series. They've done things. Netflix, I give full marks to because they were out in front of streaming, and they've done it better than the other ones. They've actually succeeded in what I started out saying, competition. This was a company from the ground up that was nothing, that Ted Sarandos turned into a giant of media. That is the damn American dream, is what Netflix is doing right now. I love it. And they've just been better at everyone else, and all these big companies tried to get in the game, and they were too late. And they were bad at it. Quite frankly, Disney's been terrible with their product. They've been bad at streaming. So now this is a bailout for them, right? This is them going with other ones saying, hey, we have these sports properties, so let's team up and let's get with people that maybe between the three of us we can figure out how to do it right the way Netflix did originally.
But keep in mind, Netflix is paying $5 billion for WWE now, for Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
That's a sign that they're also investing in this live streaming aspect. And I mean, we just had an announcement today about the price tag for another NFL exclusive playoff game, I believe. I'm looking up the text that I received today earlier. It's in the millions for one game, for an exclusive playoff game.
Well, look, if Prime, Amazon, and Netflix team up and decide they're going to team all their sports together, I'm going to be standing on this chair also saying a lot worse things about what's going on. I'm not going to like that either. They haven't teamed up yet.
They're
Prime, doing their own thing separately.
Amazon Prime's going to pay $120 million to stream its first NFL playoff game next year.
Yeah. And I'm interested to see what comes of the NFL combing through contracts, trying to figure out if they're being had in this whole thing with this. I'm telling you, there are, again, I think initially it's going to be good for the consumer. But it worries me if other companies start to team up because, and I just threw out the example, what if Amazon and Apple decided, hey, we're going to have every sporting event. We're going to have every sporting property. Let's team up. We're going to have our own joint deal with Netflix. We'll let Netflix in on it too. That's a problem. I think we look at Disney because they're behind in streaming and we look at Fox because they're not the streamer that Netflix and these others are, and we look at the Warner Brothers part of it and think, okay, we're more okay with this because they own sporting properties, but it's not Netflix, Prime Video, or Apple, so let's let them team up. I'm very curious to see how all this plays out and how this lawsuit works out.
Well, and ESPN has said through Disney, hey, we're going to invest in one thing, football. Football. NFL and the college football playoff, which they now have the rights to the most important, the true important games of the calendar year in college football. And they can now sell them individually. They don't. The NFL is looking at this thinking, we don't want to set up a model like this. We want to continue to have people pay $120 million for one game to stream it live on Amazon Prime.
Absolutely.
And so that's why they're looking into the details, trying to find loopholes with the contracts with everyone that is a part of this. Everyone's looking for survival. They want a piece of the pie.
I feel like it wouldn't be that hard to find whatever the loophole is, allegedly.
I know.
Because these companies' lawyers would have already figured that out before the merger. And if they planned on putting something on there, they would just simply tell the NFL's attorneys, hey, it's Section 14-8 that it says this and it's very vague. We're going to exercise that clause and we're going to put this on this direct-to-consumer platform.
When you have Peacock and Paramount Plus, right?
Yeah.
And Peacock's already paying for an exclusive game.
Well, now if you tell me that they're going to come back and like comb through every other part of the contract to see if it voids out with some other language in it, okay, I could buy that. But I think it'd be pretty easy to find where it is because their attorneys are going to be the one telling you. I'm talking about Fox, Warner Brothers, Disney would be the one saying, this is where we have you, and now we're going to put our NFL games here.